I'm Danielle, and welcome to This Enchanted House. So every so often, I'll be surfing the internet, checking out the cottagecore tags, and I come across this photo, or one like it. And they'll always have captions like, oh, to live the simple life, or oh, to be a witch in the woods, just, gathering my herbs, or oh, wouldn't it be wonderful to live like a simple peasant? And then there's part of me that goes, peasant? You're the peasant. That's Tasha frickin' Tudor. She is your cottagecore goddess. How can you not know who she is and still like cottagecore? But seriously, it's okay if you don't know who Tasha Tudor is. She's someone who I kind of grew up with, and probably is one of the reasons I really am now into what's called cottagecore. Like I said, I've often said I've been cottagecore before cottagecore was a word. So who is Tasha Tudor? She is a children's author and illustrator. She's written tons of books herself and illustrated a lot of children's classics, and was part of my formative years as a child. That's probably why cottagecore is something that is dear to me. So let's talk about Tasha Tudor, her amazing life and her amazing work, and why she's your cottagecore icon. So she was born in 1915 in Massachusetts. Her name is Natasha, but Tasha's a nickname. She was born to W. Sterling Burgess, who was a naval architect and early pioneer in the aviation industry, and Rosamund Tudor, who was an artist. In particular, she specialized in portraiture. Since Rosamund kind of had her own reputation, she was often introduced as Rosamund Tudor's daughter, and so she was became Tasha Tudor instead of Sterling, which is her father's name. And they were a very eccentric couple living in Boston, and her father was famous for all sorts of stunts. The one that always kind of sticks out to me is he kept a pet seal. And he called the seal Mother. And the seal was very tame and would go with him on car rides and things. But the fact that he was called Mother, and then the other thing is his nickname for Rosamund was My Pet Seal. So was Tasha Tudor's mom a Selkie? Is Tasha Tudor half Selkie? I'm being a little silly here, but it's just one of those interesting details. It's okay, she might be half Selkie. That's cool. But her parents divorced when she was 9, so her mom decided she wanted to pursue her art career after the divorce, and Tasha was sent to live with some family friends in their farm in Redding, Connecticut. And she describes this whole transition because she went from kind of a proper Boston society, even though her family themselves were kind of eccentric, to this sort of bohemian wildlife that they ran for. The children just kind of ran wherever. They had all about the whole farm to play. They'd run into town and do things. And she says this is one of those things that was really formative in her growing up and how she wanted to live her life. And she knew she always wanted to live on a farm and have that kind of lifestyle. So in 1938, she marries Thomas Macready, and they move to a farm in New Hampshire. They will have 4 kids: Bethany, Seth, Thomas, and Ethner. And during this time, she starts writing and illustrating. Her first book is called Pumpkin Moonshine, and she writes it for a relative of Thomas from who was visiting from Scotland, a little girl. And she gets it published, and she goes on to have this amazing career writing and illustrating children's books. And there's her own works, which I'm going to get into a little later. But she also illustrates a lot of children's classics, like Little Women, or the one that's probably my first Tasha Tudor book, The Secret Garden. And this is, if you've seen this edition, this is her, and this is her illustrations, and very cottagecore, and full pictures, of them working in the garden, and it's just beautiful artwork. And this is sort of what her signature is. It's flowers and natures and animals. I got this when I was about 8, and I thought, at the time, because it's a hardcover book, I thought this is a grown-up book, isn't it? Pumpkin Moonshine comes out, actually it's the same year she was married, 1938. She's really passionate. She always knew she wanted to do art and do in particular kind of illustration, even from a young age. She does like I said, children's classics like Mother Goose and poetry books and stuff like that. She did like 2 to 3 books a year during the peak of her career. In 1947, she begins to work with the American Artist Group, the AAG, which is sort of like a group that would take independent artists and then publish their work on a wider scale. So she does things like greeting cards and prints, and you can still sometimes find those in like, you know, vintage sales and things if you're lucky. I have not been that lucky yet. So in 1958, her son Tom travels to England and brings back a corgi, and she falls in love with it, and she will keep corgis for the rest of her life. And one of the series she creates is the Corgiville Affair series, which is about these anthropomorphized corgis and the adventures they have. We'll get into why corgis are important later. So she eventually will divorce her husband in 1961, and at that point she actually legally changes her name to Tasha Tudor, and all of her children actually changed their last name to Tudor too. So in the 1970s, she decides she's going to simplify her life even more. She buys property in Vermont, and her son Seth builds her a cottage and barn. And she moves to this cottage and barn and starts living this very simple life. She always kind of talks about how she always felt like she should live in the past. And she would have been very at home in the 1830s, so she, you know, tries to do things in very traditional ways. She raises goats, and she lives off the goat's milk and what she grows in her garden. And she has these huge gardens that she plants both with flowers and herbs and vegetables. And she lives this very simple life. I mean, she's out there, she has a wood-burning stove, and she's out there chopping her own wood. The cottage is called Corgi Cottage because she brings her corgis with her, and she will have corgis there until she passes away. But she lives basically this ideal cottagecore life. So in the 1990s, Richard Brown goes out to photograph Tasha for an article in a magazine or for some reason. And he just falls in love with her world and how she's living and this cottage, and it's just beautiful. And he convinces her to collaborate with a book on him just about her lifestyle, and it results in this workbook, The Private World of Tasha Tudor. This is written by her, and it's about how she lives her life and a lot of her philosophies. And if there was ever a must cottagecore book for me, this is probably it. For me, these come out in the 90s, right when I'm a teenager, and I'm checking out books. I'm really into Dollhouses at the time, and I go in the Dollhouse section, and I find the book, and then I start checking out all these books, like, from our local library on a regular basis. And there's part of me that wished I could go back in time and buy them, but adult me has gone and hunted them down from used booksellers, and actually a lot of these that I bought are actually library books. So thanks to the Richard Brown books, she experiences a resurgence in public interest, and of course she's been publishing and producing art this entire time, and producing her own books. Her last book will be Corgiville Christmas, which will come out in 2003, and then she will pass away at age 92 in 2008. So that's the brief history of her life, but there's a lot of really interesting aspects to it. One that I kind of glossed over was the Dollhouse. Tasha Tudor was very much into small things and toys and dolls. But Tasha Tudor's Dollhouse was really the first Tasha Tudor book that I got that wasn't like the illustrated book I showed you earlier, like the books, those books. It didn't really occur to me that there was a person behind that. This is the first time I really get into her life. Famously, her and her children put on a marionette show called the Red Rooster Marionette Show. They would put on these elaborate marionette plays with, several marionettes had costume changes. She and the children made everything, all the props and sets and the marionettes themselves. She also collected dolls, and she made dolls. One of her favorite dolls was named Captain Thaddeus, and famously he got married in 1955. It was featured in Life magazine. They had a big elaborate wedding where when they used marionettes as like the guests, and then all the children were dressed up too, and he got married. Sadly, the marriage sort of didn't work, because later she would create probably her favorite doll, Emma, and Emma would move in with Captain Thaddeus, and their wife also still lives in the dollhouse, I guess, because that's the thing, is she has a giant dollhouse for like doll-sized dolls, that was featured in her Dollhouse book, and is one of my favorites to read through. I guess the wife doll still lives there. It's a very modern throuple. But yeah, so she was very into dolls and miniatures, so bonus for me, because that was my two. That's honestly kind of where I found the 90s books, was I got the Tasha Tudor Dollhouse book, and then I started getting all her other books from the library, like I said. But like, to go kind of back, she did really live this cottagecore life. She had, you know, would use antiques, just like use them every day. They weren't on display. They were like part of her everyday retinue. She used a spinning wheel that she inherited from her mom's side of the family. She grew her own garden and herbs and vegetables. She kept goats. But she was still very social. She was not isolated. She would, you know, she had regular tea parties for her friends and family. She would, you know, love to go and travel and talk at various venues about her books and what she was doing with her life. But anyway, so Tasha, like, the cottage is amazing, and if you actually, it is still there. It is preserved by the Tasha Tudor Society. During non-COVID time, in the non-COVID before times, they gave tours of it, and hopefully they will again once it's safe to do so. So I'll put a link to them below. You can check them out. They also have copies of her various books and, you know, cottagey-core things. Check out. But the other thing I kind of want to address is this, and I talked at the beginning, you know, oh, there's some posts, you know, where they say, oh, she's like this witch living in the woods. And at first I was kind of like, well, I think she's Christian and probably wouldn't, you know, be really, but yeah, she kind of is like this witch living in the woods. I think she's nominally Christian because she still celebrates Christmas, and Christmas was a big holiday for her. And like I said, there's a special on that, and there's a book on that. And you know, she had the nativity scene, the creche, because I think that's more because she liked dolls than anything else. But as kind of going through and reading, there's much more to her faith than I originally thought. She's definitely inspired by the Shakers. She talks about, you know, knowing Shakers and stuff. And she actually ends up creating her own religion called Stillwater. And it's mostly an excuse to have a midsummer party on the summer equinox. And she would go all out, and you have these huge celebrations at Corgi Cottage. But yeah, so I thought I'd just maybe actually read some of her own words when it comes to this. So, just for fun, my family invented a religion like the Shakers we called Stillwater. I'm Eldris, and we have a big celebration on Midsummer's Eve. It's really a state of mind. Stillwater connotes something very peaceful, you see, life without stress. Nowadays, people are so jazzled up. If they took some chamomile tea and spent more time rocking on the porch in the evening listening to the liquid song of the hermit thrush, they might enjoy life more. Stillwater believers are very hedonistic. Life is to be enjoyed, not saddled with. Do you know the lovely quotation from Fra Giovanni? He was an old monk from way back who wrote to his patron, "The gloom of the world is but a shadow. Behind it, yet within our reach, is joy. Take joy." That's the first commandment of the Stillwater religion. Joy is there for the taking. Some people are born pessimists. Some are born optimists. I'm definitely an optimist. And in fact, her special on the Scholastic special is called Take Joy, and it's a philosophy, and it's one that I've kind of rediscovered for myself, is that especially the past few years, you have to take joy where you find it, and I find it all around me in my home and in my family. So thank you, Tasha Tudor. But she also talks about some other things here I'm going to kind of want to get into. So with ghosts, I love how she talks about ghosts. So I love how she's very nonchalant about ghosts. But I don't mind ghosts. They're very friendly and delightful things, like mist rising out of fields. The most ghostly looking thing I've ever seen were a moon rainbow. Only once in my life, late in the fall. It was very pallid and phantom-like. Talks about having a dark side, and I actually love the picture that's for this too. This is like, there's your witch picture, people. Come on. But she talks about, you know, people. She is very, first I'll say, she is very guilty about romanticizing the past. And it's, like I've talked about before, romanticizing the past isn't a bad thing as long as you understand what parts of it you're romanticizing and what part nothing in the past was better than it was today. It's always been complicated, it's always been messy. But it comes from people too, and I love this quote. She talks about herself. People have a rose-colored lens when they look at me. They don't realize I'm human. They don't see the real me. As Mark Twain said, we are like the moon. We all have our dark side that we never show to anybody. Yeah, like I said, but kind of go back to that, she does romanticize the past a little bit, and there's things in here that may not have aged well or seem kind of contradictory, but I think you have to understand, you have to take things in the spirit that, you know, the context she's talking about. Like, she loves old dresses, and she loves wearing old dresses, and she has a collection of old dresses, and if you look at her books or videos, she's, you know, some of them don't fit her anymore, but she puts them on her children, and her grandchildren wear them. And she has this to say, and when women gave up their long skirts, they made a grave error. Things half seen are so much more mysterious and delightful. Remember the term, a neatly turned ankle? Think of the thrill that gentlemen used to get if they caught even a glimpse of one. Now women go around in their union suits. And what a multitude of sins you could cover up with a long skirt if you had piano legs. It's a little dated. But you know what? There's a lot of people, and maybe, you know, we can't talk to her about, maybe we should say, oh, but you know what? If they're happy doing it, you know, they're taking joy. So, but we don't know, we can't talk to Tasha anymore. She's no longer with us, but you know, a lot of the history bounding and the vintage clothing and the cottagecore all seem to kind of go back to this kind of, like, you know, it's nice to have options, and long skirts are a great option. Long skirts, honestly, back then, you know, pockets. Pockets were a big deal. But yeah, so I just wanted to kind of touch on that, you know, even though Tasha's romanticizing the past, I always want to talk about, you know, there's a danger about romanticizing the wrong parts of the past. But anyways, that is Tasha Tudor, your cottagecore icon. I highly encourage you to find these books if you can, and they're some of my favorites, and they encapsulate cottagecore more than anything else out there, I would say. And I kind of just want to leave you guys with a quote, one of my favorite quotes from Tasha. And what a privilege even to be alive. In spite of all the pollutions and horrors, how beautiful this world is. Supposing you only saw the stars once every year. Think of what you would think. The wonder of it. So what do you guys think? Tasha Tudor, is she part of your childhood too? Do you remember her books? Do you have a favorite Tasha Tudor book? You know, comment below. We can talk about it. I hope you enjoyed our trip into Tasha Tudor. If you like this video, please give it a like. I have lots of other videos on cottagecore, and I hope you will go check them out. If you seem to like what I do here, you know, go ahead and subscribe so you can stay up with the latest. I have a proto Patreon. If you want to go over there and help me improve this channel, I would really appreciate it. If you want to connect with me on social media, I'd love to connect with you guys. So there will be links below to my Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I hope you guys all have an enchanted day, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!